Evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock, and I'd like to call together the November 14th, 2024 school committee meeting. If you would please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. This evening, we have our consent agenda posted, as well as the minutes from the October 24th, 2024 meeting, and the oath of bills and payroll. So our motion to accept.
Motion to accept.
Motion made by Vino,
Second.
seconded by Elaine. We have two members of the school committee remote this evening, so all of our votes will be roll call. Vino,
Yes.
Elaine,
Elaine, yes.
Stacy,
For 1 second.
Janine.
Janine, yes.
Thank you.
Casey, yes.
Stacy, I heard you, and Dustin McCarthy votes yes as well, so that carries. This is our first opportunity for interested citizens, so if there's anyone with us this evening, either in person or on Zoom, that would like to speak before the school committee, now's your first chance. There'll be a second chance at the end of the meeting.
We do not have.
Hearing from no one, we'll move on to recognition. We'll start with our student representative report from Raquel Rodriguez.
Thank you. So for Shaker Lane and Russell Street want to thank all the families who participated in the cultural fair. Big thanks to Vino Patel for organizing the Bollywood style presentation, as well as Eloquence Dance Studio for their Irish Strut performance. They are looking forward to conferences tomorrow and appreciate the time families have set aside for them. Russell Street also wants to thank everyone for the cultural fair, and then several Russell Street members presented in last week's cross-district PD day. Thanks to Ms. Metcalf, Ms. Patterson, Ms. McGregor, Ms. Mitchell, Ms. Fior, Ms. Gilman, Mr. Jarvis, and Ms. McKinley for sharing their expertise. And then students are moving into Module 2 of Wit and Wisdom starting next week. Third graders will focus on outer space, fourth graders will study extreme settings, and fifth graders will explore wordplay. The middle school is looking forward to parent-teacher conferences tomorrow, the high school as well, and then the high school concert is coming up on Wednesday, December 4th at 7 p.m. There's no charge, and they'd like a packed crowd, so make sure to attend.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you. We have other listed. Superintendent Clench, are there
I have a
other
few.
recognition you wish to share?
You bet. I'm pleased to announce that Littleton High School was awarded with the College Board's AP School Honor Roll recognition. And what that means is the AP courses that they offer are plentiful, so to speak. And they're really recognized for their outstanding work and expanding AP offerings to our students. And also they are recognized for providing them with a great pathway for success at college. So it's quite an honor to be recognized. So congratulations to Dr. Harrington and the rest of the administration and the staff and the students. These recognitions don't come easy. There's a lot of hard work involved in reaching this level of achievement. So congratulations, John, and please pass this on to your staff as well.
Okay, clapping. Not even here.
Thank you.
No one telling me clap.
Our fall sports season is pretty close to being finished. We have two teams, have a few games left. Our football team and our cheer leading team is still competing, but by the time Thanksgiving is over, we'll be officially out of the fall season, and our winter sports season starts on December 2nd. Good timing. I don't know about you. It's pretty cold out there tonight. It's a good time to start being inside for athletics. Third item I'd like to talk about, we've mentioned a new communication platform. It was called School Now. They've changed quite quickly with the turnover and buying out companies, etc. It's now called School Now. And we're going to be rolling this out next week. Parents, families will be getting a letter tomorrow from the principals of the schools. Next week, the school administration will start using it. Central office will blend into using it as well. And the last phase will be training and having staff use it as their communication platform. So we're excited about this. For years, we've been talking about how we can solidify our communication so it's much easier for parents to follow. It's an app-based platform, so you actually can choose how you want to receive information as well. So we're excited about this, and it's nice to be at that point in time where we can actually release it. We wanted to,
The app, I want to put it in the town newsletter.
at school now,
School now. Thank you.
and we had planned on starting it a bit earlier, but there were a lot of federal forms and approvals that needed to happen before they would allow us to enter the World Wide Web, so to speak. So it took more time. I'm glad we're at this point. And that's it for my recognitions this evening.
Great, thank you very much, Lieutenant Clenchey. All right, we've got 3 presentations scheduled for this evening, so we'll dive right in. So first up, we have an update of safety and security. So we have members of the Littleton Police Department joining us this evening for an overview of school safety training and procedures. Welcome.
Hello.
Nice to see you again.
Yeah, Brian. I just would like to start by introducing Officer Brian Jones. Brian is the Assistant School Resource Officer. He's been helping me for about a year or so. He's the only other officer certified to be in the schools as of now. So the last year he's been to the 40-hour required training course and the other 2 necessary courses to become certified. He's officially certified through post, which is something that all as school resource officers have to do now. So, introduce yourself, and you've already done so to everybody. All right. Officer Jones has been very valuable to me in the last year or so. And days that I go to trainings or days that I take off, he's been able to step in and help out and assist in ways that I've needed him to. And he's also takes the time to go to the elementary schools, which allocates more time for me to be at the high school and really focused on my attention there. So it's been very, very crucial for me to have an extra set of things. So thank you. That's that. If you want to go.
What's that?
You're welcome to
All right.
sit. I'll take the rest from here. I just wanted to touch briefly upon the updates that I have in regards to safety and security. First off, all the school safety drills have been done and they're complete. We will do an additional one in the spring. As in years past, we've always abided by the ALICE protocol, which is an active shooter response plan designed to improve survival during violent incidents. ALICE empowers individuals to make quick decisions in rapidly changing situations rather than adhering to a rigid one-size-fits-all response. After the school year, we will be transitioning to ALERT, which is now going to be avoid, deny, and defend. So ALERT will be the law enforcement response, and the civilian response that we will abide by will be AIR, A-I-I-R. And the AIR protocol stands for avoid, isolate, inform, and react. So this is an active shooter response strategy focused on guiding civilians through a structured response plan during an active threat. And so I'll give you the breakdown of it just a little bit. I'll give you a brief description of what it stands for. Officer Jones and I, we have not attended the training to be officially certified in it. As of yet, it's a 12-hour course, which hopefully we will have completed by the end of this year. So just to break it down, avoid, the first priority is to get away from the shooter if possible. This involves quickly assessing safe escape routes, leaving belongings behind, and moving as far away from the threat as possible. Isolate is if escape is not an option, the next step is to find a secure location to hide, lock doors, barricade entry points, and turn off lights to stay out of sight. Inform, if safe, communicate with authorities and others, providing real-time information about the location, description, or actions of the shooter to aid first responders. And lastly, react. As a last resort, if confronted directly, take defensive action to protect yourself. This may involve physically countering the shooter with any available objects or distractions to disrupt their focus and create an opportunity for escape. So the difference from ALERT and ALICE, it's simplicity and the flexibility of it. AIR emphasizes clear, straightforward actions in any setting and may be easier for those with limited training to remember under stress. The terminology AIR uses slightly different terminology, avoid, isolate, inform, and react, that focuses on distancing, isolation, and protection, similar to ALICE, but framed to emphasize simple sequential actions. AIR, like ALICE, is designed to empower civilians with specific actions to improve survival during an active shooter event, offering steps adaptable to varying levels of situational awareness and safety.
All of Massachusetts is transitioning from Alice to AIR, primarily to streamline and simplify the response process for civilians, especially in schools. Some of the key reasons for this shift is clarity and usability. AIR steps are seen as simpler and more intuitive, which helps reduce confusion during high-stress situations. Using terms like avoid, isolate, inform, and react offers a more straightforward approach that's easier for students, teachers, and staff to remember and apply quickly under pressure. It reduces emphasis on countering. AIR minimizes the focus on actively countering a shooter, which can be a challenging concept for certain civilians, particularly young students. So the counter aspect of Alice has faced criticism for potentially encouraging untrained civilians to engage in a shooter, which some schools feel is not appropriate or safe. AIR shifts towards actions that keep civilians out of harm's way instead. It focuses on consistency. The AIR protocol aligns more closely with other safety procedures, which can make training more cohesive and consistent across schools and public institutions. The straightforward language also makes it easier to train and apply uniformly across varied groups. Adaption and feedback and research. The transition reflects insights from recent research and feedback from school districts, law enforcement, and mental health professionals. AIR aims to address concerns about the psychological impact of training younger students on countering techniques, focusing instead on avoidance, isolation, and reactive options as more age-appropriate response. So this shift helps Massachusetts schools adopt a response plan that is more suited to the capabilities and comfort levels of student and staff, balancing safety with practical, realistic expectations. So that's just kind of a brief overview. Once we are fully certified, we're happy to kind of come back and give more in-depth or have question Q&A if you guys want. But I figured just rather than be standing up here saying we're going from Alice to alert, you guys not really knowing that's about, it's not very helpful for anything. So do you guys have any questions on that before I have my last update?
No questions from me. Seeing shaking heads, Janine and Stacy, all set?
No, I'm just glad to hear that you guys have updated the drill. So I appreciate you looking into that and getting the training that we need for something that's a little bit more age appropriate. So yes, thank you.
Yeah, same. I was trained on the Alice training when I was a teacher, and it was upsetting to the teachers too, so.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
yeah.
and also to the students, so
Yeah,
I'm really
this will be
glad that there's
a good
response.
transition.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
and this will be,
So this will be
Next year.
implemented in the next school year. That way we have enough time to train ourselves, hopefully get staff up to date, and then roll it out with the kids first half of the school year in fall.
awesome.
Yeah.
And welcome, happy to have another SRO on the team.
Okay, and so last thing, on December 11th, I don't know if that's confirmed or not, tabletop. Yes,
Almost.
confirmed. Okay. Well, in the very near future, personnel from police, fire, the NEMLIC SWAT team, the NEMLIC STARS team. The STARS team is the school threat assessment and response system, which is also a part of NEMLIC for our region. School staff, admin council, central office personnel, we're all going to be participating in a tabletop exercise, which focuses on active shooter and active threat response. So this is going to be a scenario-based exercise, and what will happen is each school will walk, we will walk each school through multiple scenarios from start to finish, allowing each team to discuss their specific response protocols and what services are provided during and after an active threat situation. Following this, school personnel will review their roles in the reunification process. The primary goal of this exercise is to proactively enhance our readiness for an active threat situation. So once the exercise concludes, we plan to reconvene, and the chief and I hope to return back here to discuss the outcomes and explore next steps or further training and exercises. Last month, Officer Jones and I attended the alert training for Amesbury, Methuen, and Newburyport. They all conducted 2 tabletop exercises within the last year. And then last month, they ultimately progressed to a live action scenarios with the police, fire, school administrators. Their mayor was in attendance. So this comprehensive hands-on approach will also be our goal, and to expand involvement and practical experience for everyone involved. So it's good to take the initiative to be, proactive rather than reactive. And I think this is a good start for everybody who's going to be involved that day. So I'd like to extend, I don't know if I'm allowed to extend the invite to any school committee members Maybe,
For
maybe on
sure.
the second, maybe on the
Sure.
second. Maybe not necessarily the first tabletop, but maybe this, if we do end up doing a second one, we can make sure you guys are included and see what's going on behind the scenes.
I think that would be very helpful.
That's all I.
Awesome, thank you for the update. Any questions, comments? Janine? I've got a quick one, but Janine or Stacy, any questions for Officer Wodzinski?
No, thank you very much for everything you're doing for us. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your presentation.
So occasionally we hear from members of the community about potential need for a second school resource officer. Sounds like Brian, at times maybe we have both of you, but
Mhm.
it's probably the equivalent of one full-time or
Correct.
1 point something.
Yes.
Can you talk to us a little bit about, other than the training and, you know, a nice police presence and getting to know the kids and like the aspect that is, but what are some other things that you folks do in the school system? Like, how has the caseload changed? What's, you know, what is the trend for this type of stuff? Just so we have kind of your side of the story in terms of what the need might be to add a second
Yeah.
school resource officer at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, knock on wood, I think that the start of the school year has been pretty quiet. I mean, this is my third year now, and that seems to be the trend, is in the beginning of the school year, it is very quiet. And then usually after the first break, we come back, and that's usually kind of when stuff starts to unfold. I don't have anything specific that I can give you that we do on a daily basis. Every day is different. You know, with having a second SRO, it would give us the ability to start more programs and be able to attend other schools on a regular basis. Right now, I don't have the time to go to all the schools like I would like to. I do, if they have an issue, I mean, principals here are great. They are very capable of dealing with situations on their own, and they only call me if need be. I mean, I think in the back of their head, they know that I have other things going on, which I appreciate, but I also would like to have the opportunity to go to these other schools, if I did have the time. I would like to go I go into the middle school quite often to help Trish Bonacor teach in health class. Sometimes I'm not always able to 100% attend those classes because I'm being pulled for various things. So having somebody else, it's a good tool for us to, even if I couldn't make it, if Officer Jones or another officer could be in attendance. I wouldn't say that we're dealing with kids getting in fights every day. And, you know, I think last year, towards the end of the year, we were struggling with kids vaping. You know, we can't all be everywhere at once. And so unless we're catching kids doing it, we know that it's a problem, but unless we're catching kids red-handed, you know, there's really not a whole lot we can do. So I think that having another officer, somebody else available to try to, and I can't go into the men's room, obviously, so having another officer of a different sex would be useful in situations like that. Not that we don't have other principals, but just to have us to be able to go into the bathrooms on a regular basis and, you know, even just for the security of the schools, just to walk around each school a couple times a day. I come in the morning and I do my lap around the high school. I don't have the time every day to necessarily go to each school and do that. So it would be nice again to have an extra set of hands to do that. Then it's your question.
It does. And my understanding is that if there are events that are happening outside of school, that maybe in that student's, you know, family, extended family, whatever, and there's components of it where the police are involved, you folks are very helpful in those situations as well.
Yeah.
So it extends beyond just, you know, top level security within the school.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, I can speak to at least 2 cases this year where we've had a student with some mental health issues going on, and I've had to come in past my normal 8-hour scheduled shift. I'm happy to do that. I'm not always available to do that. So again, it is nice to have somebody else with the flexibility to do that. Not that our patrol officers aren't capable of handling these situations, because they very much are. But Officer Jones and I think that we've done a good job in building relationships with the students. And when they see a familiar face, not necessarily somebody just coming in a uniform, I think that's very helpful. And Officer Jones has done a great job going into the elementary schools and starting to build those relationships with the younger students. So again, we would like to host more events after school hours. But again, sometimes when it's just one of us, it's not, maybe not as successful as having two of us.
And we all know that mental health challenges are increasing all over, and in our community is no exception to that. So, you know, certainly dealing with more families and students that are struggling that can require services and intervention at times. So it's also in terms of security, having another resource officer with us would allow them to spend more time training staff, be available for staff. I mean, we all know when we have to bring a police officer in, it's not planned. It's something that just happens. Very seldom do we have the luxury of saying, well, at 8:50, we're going to need a police officer. So, and this is kind of a precursor to our December 13th meeting. Chief Bernard and I and Detective Wazinski have been talking the last couple of years, and we have had citizens, families in our community asking us to reassess how we deploy resource officers. So at the December 13th meeting, Chief Bernard and Detective Wazinski and myself will give you a rationale and why we would like to move ahead with the second resource officer, and our plan would be to have that implemented in January of this year. So it's kind of an idea of what is coming in December. So we do have the funding to support that, and maybe to go back a bit. Feel like a historian at times. Way back in 2011, we had budget challenges in the town, and the school department, with the budget challenges, had a number of out-of-district students move in during the summer. So we're in a deficit situation. We managed to get out of it, but we cut a number of staff, and we had to take the funding away from the resource officer. The police department at that time stepped up and picked that position up. So now it's time with the needs that we have for us to reciprocate, help pay for a second resource officer. We do have the finances to do that. So stay tuned. We'll have more on December 13th for you.
Great news.
And Detective Wazinski, I'd just like to thank you for everything that you do for our school district. At times it can be intensive. You're spread very thin, and you put a lot of hours and time on our students and families definitely benefit from your leadership in our schools. And we're very fortunate in our community to have relationships we do with our departments. We have a very close relationship with our police department, fire department, all departments. And it's nice to recognize Chief Bernard, who when I first came here was the high school's resource officer. So, nice to have that. All right, thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
Move on to our second presentation, which is the MCAS update. Director of Teaching and Learning, Elizabeth Steele, along with the high school, middle school, Russell Street administrators, will give an update on the 24 spring MCAS results and next steps.
Awesome.
Welcome.
Thank you. Here to present our 2024 MCAS update for you all. So tonight's presentation is going to mirror what we've seen a little bit in the past. And to remind ourselves that MCAS, like other data points, is a point of data. And it's one of many that we share throughout the year. And in all reality, it's the compilation of all of these data points, along with anecdotal data, that allows us to see the whole picture of a student progress. And so it's important just to keep that in mind as we continue through this presentation this evening. You'll note that we are continuing to use Open Architects. Thankfully, they have continued their partnership with DESE, so it's a nice platform for us to see the uniformity and just very easily use of analyzing that data. One difference to call out in comparison, sometimes we like to compare direct presentation from last year to this year, is that the Open Architects platform did advance. And what they were able to do is differentiate that students with IEPs versus students on 504 plans. And so when we go through the presentation, what you will see is that this year's presentation, we call out students on IEPs and not including students on 504 plans. So a difference when you're looking at if you happen to be comparing year to year. Tonight's presentation, you will see the order here. I'll share some pertinent information related to MCAS 2024. And then we will dive into school by school. We use a similar model of what, so what, now what, right? So the idea of what is the data, what does it actually say? The so what is our impressions of that data, and then the now what are the next steps. And so you'll see that modeled through every school as we present this evening. So I'll start with the pertinent information, and maybe most pertinent now when we say MCAS being related to last week in the election, your mind might straight go to the ballot question that was on the ballot last week. And so we know that the results were that the question passed. And so we are still awaiting more information on the implementation and impact of that law. And so we're waiting for more information, knowing that there are changes to come. However, we're in the moment and presenting on what is the current state of affairs, which at this point in this evening, nothing has changed. And so we're presenting the 2024 information as that is. With regards to spring 2024 MCAS, our ELA and math MCAS assessments for grades 3 through 8 and 10 were full assessments, and they were the typical assessments as we've expected. Science for grade 9, again, full assessment as anticipated with regards to grade 9 science. When we go into science for grades 5 and 8, DESE is looking at making changes. There are a couple items into a field testing and piloting of changing their assessment. Last year, we were informed that we were to participate in the field test in the pilot of this assessment. And so what that meant for us is that our grade 5 students and our grade 8 students participated in this. What that means is that MCAS Science has 2 test sessions. One of those test sessions was just like everyone else taking in the state as the typical kind of old form of assessment with regards to the science MCAS. That is what the results are based on this year. So that is what they were able to take the results from the session. So half of the assessment, that was the regular assessment, and provide us with results that they were able to calculate and compare with everyone across the board in grades 5 and 8. The other half, or the other test session that our students took, was the field test. It was the pilot. And so what DESE is trying to shift to is more of an idea of doing science. So really being able to transfer knowledge and skills onto an interactive performance task. So it might include more simulation as opposed to just repeating information on this. This year, across the state, everyone is participating in the pilot, the field test. So again, for our students in grades 5 and 8, it'll be just like last year because we participated in it last year. The anticipated date of that becoming a new operational fully changed assessment is the 25-26 school year. So we still have another year to go before that happens. With regards to civics, we participated last year, again, in a civics field test. And so our students were able to participate in this assessment. It allowed us to kind of see what does that look like? What does the actual day of look like for that? And that was helpful as this year, that becomes an operational MCAS assessment. So even though, just to clarify, that the ballot question passed, right? It did not take away any MCAS assessment. It took away the competency determination that was tied to the high school MCAS assessment. So all MCAS exams are still moving forward. And as you can see, DESE is still moving forward with changes with regards to the assessments. It's the competency determination tied to graduation. That is what changed with the ballot question. So the civics MCAS, just to give you a little overview, because it's slightly different than the other MCAS assessments, it has 2 major components. One is an end of course assessment that's given at the end of the school year. It covers all of the grade 8 standards. that are covered in a grade 8 civics class. And the other component is a performance task. And that covers one of these 7 topics that are within the grade 8 civics standards. And this year, they released it already. We know that that topic for this first operational assessment come spring is topic 4, which is rights and responsibilities of citizens. So with that, we'll dive right into the actual data and results, starting with John Harrington High School.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
I'd like to start by just saying, and Dr. Clench acknowledged it at the beginning, we have a great school, impressive students, talented staff. This year, we do not have the MCAS scores we prefer to present to report on. We do have a concerning trend with increasing number of students scoring the partially meeting expectations category. We have work to do. We acknowledged this in last year's presentation, but the work continues. Tonight, we report the results and offer remedies and strategies for moving ahead and improving performance. In our debrief with the different departments and as administrators, we've already come up with some other approaches, more intensive to provide, more intervention with students, identifying them earlier. And we had some really good plans in our action steps last year, but this year we really need to follow through. There was definitely some cracks in our approach where we sort of relied on, past performance and, this will work itself out. And this year, we've already started the year with common planning time for English Language Arts Department, Math Department, and we'll also be providing time for science teachers to get together and discuss the preparation for biology. But I just wanted to lead at the outset that we have to acknowledge that the trend line in the graph that you'll see will identify some concerns. So you can see that 66% of the cohort in last spring's ELA MCAS were meeting or exceeding expectations. That's not typical for us. In the past, we've had a much higher performance. And if we look at comparable schools that we like to, that we are typically considered in company with, we can see some of them outperforming us in this area. So we're going to reach out to those schools and sort of see in all department areas, the Principals Association, Midwest Principals Association, we're president of, has a meeting tomorrow. We're setting up content area meetings for all the different departments across the 27 schools of the league or the association. And one of the areas of interest is this particular topic of MCAS and how to improve performance. So, one of the questions I'm sure that will emerge tonight is what do we do now that about question that is a skill of knowledge is passed? How will that impact the gravity or the seriousness which the students take, approach the test? So we'll get to that. But just to report the results, you can see the graph there. The public can see it on TV. You can see that we're dipping in the gray area is increasing and the blue area is decreasing in terms of the trend line. And so it's a very nice graph there. We're also not where we want to be in comparison to the state averages. We'd like to be a little bit higher, certainly in our performance with achievement. SGP is sort of, it can be where it can be close to the state sometimes because of our small sample size. But we had moderate growth, typical growth, it's called. But as you can see, compared to the previous year, this cohort was, went down in the meeting and exceeding categories by 12%. And we also have some work to do with, our collaboration or, just checking in on this very small sample size. We have to acknowledge that for our students, in general, but also in the students with disabilities with the IEP category, students with web IEPs, performance compared to last year was down a bit, minus 8%. So just want to acknowledge that with ELA. The other thing I wanted to note, I took a minute, yesterday afternoon, a few minutes, and as well as this afternoon, to sort of look at the students, particularly in the partially meeting category. And 29 of the 39 students, so about 74% of those in the partially meeting category for ELA scored between a band. This is a little specific, but this is how granular and detailed we're getting with the data. We're going to even get deeper back at the building. But between 486 and 499, which is the partially meeting category, where they passed the test. They did not need an EPP, an educational proficiency plan. 46% of students scored greater than or equal to 490. Now, if they hit 500, they're meeting expectations. So that's kind of interesting. A lot of them came close to meeting expectations, but they were just shy. By, what were the questions that tripped them up? Did they leave things blank? What did that hurt them? We have to look at that. And that just, not to get too small in terms of numbers, but there were about at least a half a dozen students who were very close, within less than 5 points of scoring meeting expectations. So, something could have been having a bad day. There could be a number of reasons for that, but we did look at the data at that level of detail. And 56% of our ELA partially meeting students or students in that category improved their MCAS score since LMS. So we started looking much more closely at MCAS history. We really want to do that this year. I think we overlooked that last year, looking at MCAS history, looking at the 8th grade results, and looking at early warning signs and trying to look for indicators of where students might be in trouble. But it was sort of refreshing for us to find out that at least 56% of the students who were in that partial meeting category this year outperformed how they did in 8th grade. And 9 students in this cohort will require, if it's still in effect, we're not sure about that after the vote passed, whether they'll need educational proficiency plans because they scored less than 485 on the test. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide of the math. So you can see again a similar trend line. Too much gray, not enough blue. Like that. We talked, that was the race you used earlier today, which we were looking at the graphs together. 66% meeting or exceeding expectations. We really like to see that pushed up next year. And hopefully this time when we're reporting out, we'll be able to probably say that we've done that since we're really committed to that. The previous year, we're down 6% in the meeting exceeding category, and meeting or exceeding down 16% of students with IEPs. And that's only 15%. Again, a very small number, say somewhere between 15 and 20 students overall in this sophomore class taking the grade 10 path, I guess, with IEPs. It speaks for itself. SGP is worth noting that, again, typical moderate growth. Some years have been quite high. And we're closing in on that, but we'd like to be higher than we are. So that's a commitment for us as well. I would like to note, as I did similarly for English language arts, I took a look at the partially meeting category, and that's the grade 2024 on the far right. You look at the graph. 56% of the students scored between 486 and 495. Therefore, they passed and did not require an EPP, so that's reduced. 37% of the students scored greater than a 490 or were close to meeting expectations in this category, zeroed in on this category. How close were the kids who just missed it? 8 students were even closer to within 5 points of scoring in the meeting expectations category. And 61% of our math students who in the partial meeting category improved their 61% improved their scores from middle school and 8th grade in math. And it's good to see that the students who would, their MCAS history indicates that they were struggling with mathematics and MCAS tests. They did pull it up when they got to the high school. Okay, so next slide. We had a little discrepancy. The SGP is not reported for science. I think you already know that. We had a little discrepancy, and we had 2 different types of programs and platforms for running meeting and exceeding. So there was an error in your previous packet, so we corrected that. I think that has gone out to you before the meeting. So meeting and exceeding category, not as good as we thought it was in terms of that first graph you saw, but it's 69%. So, again, a similar trend line. If you look from over the last 3 years where we are, we have work to do here. But there's always some, you always find certain, the stories behind the number. Each student has a story, and we always celebrate the students who, wow, that student had expectations. So that student, did not need an educational proficiency plan for math or English. But that student who really has significant disabilities was really able to pull it off in biology and pass the test. So, those are things we celebrate. We don't report those out. We don't bring up names tonight or ever in public about their MCAS performance. But every year, there's a lot of families, especially when the graduation requirement was in place, really pleased that, wow, they were really concerned with the student going into high school. confronting more rigorous content. And maybe they had a history of really struggling with, you know, math and ELA throughout since Russell Street, and then they pulled it off in high school. We've always been able to say that students pass the MCAS. But yes, we're concerned about the partially meeting category, but our not meeting expectations categories, as you can see, are quite small. That continue. Students have successfully passed the MCAS with support, even if they meet EPPs. They pass and they graduate from Milton High School, and that requirement was in effect. So we're proud of that. The students who did not meet expectations, for the most part, were not surprises for us. We know their stories, we know their history, we know the supports that were provided, as intensive as they were. And we know that some of them, because of the significance of their disabilities, their parents have, and they know that they're not going to receive a high school diploma when that was in place, that the requirement was in place. And now students who did not meet expectations, according to the state has voted, will be able to receive a high school diploma despite not meeting expectations on this test. That's, of course, providing that they satisfy local graduation requirements at the high school. Next up, the next slide, I'll have some impressions. You know, we often report this out, and, you know, we can sometimes take it for granted, but the teachers have always, when they review data, are really happy to report that students continue to perform better on most items. Next, I would say majority of the items, really beyond that size. Just some years it's been just about all, but this year not so much than the state average. And you saw the SGPs that sort of summing their cohort meeting expectations. This cohort in the category of meeting and exceeding increased by 13% ELA and 53% to 66%. And this is cohort data from when they were in 8th grade. And they're in this class of 2026, the cohort data indicates that in the meeting exceeding categories, they increased by 20% math from 46 to 66%. So that's good to see that growth over time and worth noting. Typical action steps that we often report are coming up in the next slide, but I'll just go over to the, you just go back a second slide. Challenges, it goes without saying, having a third of the students scoring partially meeting expectations category for English and math is not where we want to be. Up close to 30% scoring partially in science, not where we want to be. And then, of course, I just want to acknowledge that nearly doubled in math since 2021. The next generation standard did kick in, I think, officially in 2022, not 2021. So maybe they might, if that's maybe a lot more challenging, I'll be asking the teachers about that. That was something that the science department wanted to me, particularly about their test. Partial meeting percentage in science has increased this year since 2021. So again, we have work to do in developing skills, improving achievement levels, specifically increasing the proportion of students in the meeting and exceeding expectations category. Overall, we'll continue intervention, 9th, 10th grades, strengthen academic support, and tutoring, especially for students with IEPs. We have a long list of very specific things that the teachers have identified that they really want to do. As administrators, what we want to do is be more involved in the process. We're going to be meeting with them more regularly, providing more common planning time. So if we go to the next slide, please see. So I'll just take a minute to look at that. And some of these are things that we would do every year, but I think it's really important to make sure that we're adhering to it. Are we doing what we say we do? We want to do. Conduct a thorough item analysis to identify areas of concern, make related curricular instructional adjustments, especially with word problems and open response questions. That was really something that both math and English identified. Embed explicit review of student MCAS history and previous ELA and math grades. That's already underway. We're creating spreadsheets to really track the students in 9th through 10th grade and see if there's anyone we really need to spotlight, provide most important tutoring for well before the test, not as a test prep thing and rally in early March or late February because they have March ELA test, or wait till April to prepare for the May one. This is something that will be an ongoing effort throughout the year. Now, I've already mentioned the providing dedicated common planning time. Teachers have already engaged in this. We continue to plan to do this on a regular basis. The difference now is that both Mr. Kamal, the assistant principal, and the director of teaching, Lauren Cecile, will be involved and really trying to facilitate, maybe even providing some very specific protocols for data analysis. Teachers do a great job at preparing, delivering their lessons, but something like this, they might need some more guidance on in terms of reviewing data, where just the time to do it. That we want them to feel supported too, and said we're all in this together, as the cliche says. We also want, it's not in here, but we had a couple of notes. Well, just before this meeting, we really want to have students take their time. You notice there's an anecdotal evidence that some of them were rushing in the last few years to get through it. Just they were in a larger test setting this past few couple of years rather than being in classrooms, and that can be contagious when kids start to leave the room, and it's easy to be influenced by it. So we want to I should hurry up and get mine done. Everybody's leaving. I want to go to lunch. So really encouraging students to take more time. And providing really helpful practice tests. That's the other thing, and checking and monitoring curriculum alignment with standards and things like that. The specific one really in the middle there, continue to incorporate claim evidence, reasoning techniques with writing exercises. That's from the science teachers, Dr. Finnegan and Mrs. Berlinger. Enhanced formative assessments with MCAS style exemplars, writing prompts, released MCAS questions. So our job as administrators and with the department coordinators is to work together and see that this is happening and really monitor it and see if they have any concerns. We don't expect everybody in the next cohort that's going through the test in spring to be expert test takers or to do, glowing, but we want them to exceed expectations and develop more confidence and believe in their performance and be prepared as best they can. We feel like we could do better in the preparation of these students, and maybe to some extent engaging the parents in the process too, more than we have in the past. I don't want to say that we've become complacent, but we certainly got used to really high performance on MCAS. In past years, many of us have been around a while and always report out that the high school's scores were great. By the time they get to high school, they do pass the test, but we also don't want their performance to really continue to slide. And again, continue close collaboration with special education teachers to improve performance of students by IPs and monitor their performance more closely. So those are the next steps. We wanted to make sure that we were completely open, as we often are, in talking about areas. We celebrate our successes, but we also like to be open and ready to present instructional challenges, but also leadership challenges. And this is clearly one of them, to reverse that trend and start to try to see a more positive trend upward. And less kids in the partially meeting, more kids in exceeding meeting expectations. That's our goal. So I wanted to just be really honest and open and put ourselves out there, because the data is that the results are there. We can see it, and we have work to do.
Great presentation. Questions or comments from the committee members? Don't be shy. Talk about good news all the time, so.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I appreciate that your next steps don't all involve teaching to the test. Like, so many of them are just really good teaching practices, like, incorporating claim evidence reasoning and incorporating more formative assessments so that you can track student progress. And, so many of these things I think will bear out in time in improved MCAS scores. So I'm glad that you're focusing on best practices. But I had a question about, this particular cohort that with the disappointing scores. You mentioned earlier that you had done some work tracking this cohort back to, their middle school MCAS scores. I mean, it's possible this could just be one of those cohorts that just has more students that struggle than, we all see those cohorts.
I appreciate you saying that, Lee, because it is true. There are certain cohorts that come through where we've seen the students really struggle just with, so we're going to look at their grades as well in English and math for 9th and 10th grade. How did they do? Is it discrepant data? Do we have a grade inflation thing going on where they scored well in their final grades, but they didn't do well on a test that could corroborate, confirm their performance, or what's missing and what's the gap? What did the teacher do differently to ensure that they had strong grades, A's and B's in some cases, that they scored in the partially meeting category? So we'll have those conversations, try to suspend, we'll put judgment over here and just sort of try to look at the problem together and say, what's happening here? What's going on? What do we do about it? But we definitely want to look at MCAS history for the current ninth grade and the 10th grade, and really look for early warning signs that students have even eighth grade final grades, get the transcripts of the report cards, reach out to middle school administrators. I think we need access to that aspect, but look at, how do they finish in math and English, and science as well, and see if there's areas that we could. Our teachers do a lot of pre-assessments and diagnostic testing anyway, so that's helpful. So they can sort of predict who might not perform well. A lot of the students who score in the partially meeting, certainly not meeting, which is only a few, were not surprises to us. But a number of them even in the partially meeting. But I have to say that a third, that's a little surprising. Why did those kids? That's why I wanted to indicate that a lot of kids came close.
Yeah.
To that 500 score that they need to be in the meeting category, but they missed it. And so we're gonna have to look at their test results. We do get that detailed data from testing.
Yeah.
So that should be helpful. I am curious to see how we'll be talking about this as the year unfolds, as the state responds to the ballot decision. And how we prepare kids for both educational proficiency plans, whether they're still expected, how we prepare them for an MCAS test that does not have such high stakes attached for it, where we would expect more of a diagnostic test for it, similar to grades 3 to 8. It hasn't hindered our colleagues at the other schools from really putting an emphasis on, performing well in the MCAS. They really do that, but we'll see how high school students respond to that when they know it. It's not something they have to take as a requirement. I'll be curious to see what the state does and districts do to incentivize kids to put their best effort forward.
Well, this is a really robust list of next steps. So I think to anybody who's worried about the impact of question 2, that it's going to lower the quality of education. I mean, clearly the high school's taking this very seriously, even though the graduation requirement's not attached to it.
I
So
appreciate you said it. Some people might even question that, right? Why we don't want to overly focus on one metric. So the key thing here, and this very well with the curriculum background, is to make sure that we're aligned, that the lesson planning, the delivery of the lesson, and the assessment is all aligned to the standards. And then it prepares students well to perform on a test that's aligned to the standards. And they should be just fine if we prepare them well. And we've given them some strategies on how to take a deep breath, relax about a test, that kind of thing. And just good test taking, put more time into it. We find that students, especially on the essays, when they put more time to write, substantially more, they get a better score. They didn't rush through it. That's just one thing.
Yeah, I also just appreciate really the transparency. It's more concerning when everything is positive all the time, and it's, really appreciate the honesty. The Littleton has a lot of strengths and certainly areas to work on, and, it's really evident that you're doing that. And I think the approach is what's important, and what I sort of see as a positive is that though there are areas to work on, we are approaching it in the right way, and in a positive way.
I appreciate it.
My question is around curriculum, and this sort of goes to my background of early childhood and the impact of early childhood. When I see stuff in high school, it makes me wonder sort of what we're doing earlier. And I know that there's been curriculum changes. And so I'm just curious if we look at sort of data and time and like when those curriculum changes are made, because it's interesting, you'll see the impact of that 5-6 years later from when the 3rd, 5th graders become 10th graders, right? So I don't know what the curriculum was then. I know we made a big curriculum change in ELA recently. I guess time will tell, what impact that has. But you mentioned, especially I saw, where did it say something about essay word problems with the response questions? Like you've identified areas where students are having challenges. Does the curriculum that we're now moving towards address some of that in an age appropriate way that's earlier, or do you do that sort of analysis as
well? I think
maybe that's the best
Mrs.
question.
Keel could probably
Yeah.
address the, and the principals that we on Russell Street and middle school that could address their curriculum changes. But I do think that if we put a strong, we strengthen our emphasis on literacy, and there's been some presentations about that as well, that we'll see the benefits of that.
Yeah.
You're going to hear some really great news from middle school, and I think about their results tonight. And so that cohort's coming.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's the point.
And, and we have to, we do acknowledge, we try, I want to be open again about, we're trying to get the, staff, we have to acknowledge, yes, it was a tough time they went through it.
Yeah.
Students went, staff went through a tough time with COVID and things like that. But that's a few years back.
Yeah.
We can't keep talking about that as for the gaps, especially when we've had the kids, this particular cohort, we had them for 2 years in high school.
Yeah.
And so it's not like they came, they were remote or that kind of thing. They were in middle school. We don't want to be making excuses for performance that isn't where we want it to be.
Yeah.
So it will be really interesting though to see how we incentivize kids and whether we can use this as a diagnostic in some way. We also want to be sure to look at our other metrics, our other indicators of high performance. Dr. Clenchey brought up one right at the open set of the meeting, which was the RAP honorable recognition this year. Those kids who were, we saw the trend line. Those, the performance wasn't that as well, wasn't where we wanted it to be last year. A lot of those kids are AP kids and did really well on AP exams. So it goes to motivation, it goes to, maturity and academic skill development. So, the students are taking this in 9th and 10th grade, 9th for biology and 10th for English and math. So we do see that as our student will look at other metrics to assess the high school, we often want to, to examine how we're performing as a school. We know from previous presentations throughout the year, there's a lot to celebrate at Littleton High School. So this is an area of growth for us, for sure.
Yeah, and my intention is not to say this cohort is a lost cause,
No.
because they're certainly not, because actually your cohort
It's
data
like
comparison itself actually is significantly up from the 8th grade. The
Right,
stat you shared of
that
this
was a-
cohort itself and
Yeah,
their
they
growth.
improved. The students who were struggling with partially meeting category, just didn't meet expectations.
Yeah.
They were partially meeting, and they at different ranges, and some of them really close to meeting expectations. They, in many cases, outperformed how they did at
Yeah.
LMS in other grade, which is good to see.
Yeah, that's really telling. That actually shows their growth even,
Right.
after 8th grade versus comparing cohort to cohort, which is sometimes hard because it's an entirely different group of students.
Yeah.
Though as a trend, we would want to keep track of it, but I really appreciate the
Yeah.
upward movement of this cohort itself, which is.
Right. Thank you very much.
Janine or Stacy, do you have questions or comments for Dr. Harrington?
I don't, thank you.
No, I think you guys covered everything. Thank you.
I have a couple for you. They're kind of loose thoughts here. You touched on it a little bit, but I was wondering about like this academic divide within the high school. Like, do we do a really good job with the overachievers and the AP students? Because we had that presentation, like it's an overwhelming number of students that earn AP credit, and where this assessment is across the general population. Well, number one, let me start by saying I acknowledge this is one data point, and doesn't represent
Right.
the entire student, doesn't represent the efforts of the staff, but it is a data point. It's an easy one to get. And, Boston Magazine's, top 10 high school, Greater Boston, like,
Mhm.
are we gonna fall out of there
Yeah,
next year?
If they still use this metric, this will be exciting.
So while we're talking about it, let's talk about it. And I appreciate the transparency and all that good stuff. So I have concerns about an academic divide within the high school. Like, do we have these really great programs and offer top level instruction to those that want it? And then do we perhaps potentially maybe underserve the general population?
I would
Just
say-
a concern of mine.
I hear you, and I think it's something we want to look at. I would say for our special education staff and department supports, I brought them up in previous presentations. There's a lot of resources that the school committee and the superintendent and Snow and other folks have been involved in providing at the high school that really beefed up our level of service. So we appreciate that. We added a special education teacher this year, so that should help. Who's also teaching, a more intensive math, co-teaching a math course. So that's really helpful. So I would just want to focus specifically on students with disabilities there, that there's a lot of supports in place. Teachers and the educational support professionals each day are doing a good job with them. Could we do better? Yes, the data tells us, at least with MCAS, that we could. Are they doing better than they in classes that they take? Perhaps we're gonna have to look at that data. The other, to speak specifically to your divide, I really want to look at the college prep. We have different levels at the high school. We have, AP students, so, we can't offer enough APs for sometimes some of the kids that want to take them. But they want, so we're offering them online and things like that. And kids are studying on their own. We've talked about this in a previous presentation. So I would say though, that we need to look at, are there significant, to go right at your question, are there significant differences between college preparatory classes and honors classes, and is that reflected in the results? Are honors kids, students who are in honors classes, scoring in the partial meeting category, and if so, why? And and how did that happen? And so, because we have a lot of overrides sometimes for courses, especially where parents and students want to take honors courses, but they've been recommended for a college prep course. What's the distinction? Superintendent actually brought this up this summer by talking about what are the true distinctions between college prep and honors. Some schools have unleveled certain, they start with usually a specific department, whether it's history in ninth grade or English, or they might, math, it's a little bit trickier sometimes, and people generally acknowledge that, but some people might be in favor of across the board, unleveling ninth grade. But where do you start? But before we would get to that, decision, we would need to look at data. We don't want to look at other schools that are similar. We've tried that and then reverted back to instituting honors and CP. There's a caution there to do that. But first, we have to identify, to answer your question directly, by doing an inquiry into that and saying, do we have a significant difference between students who, the educational delivery, the opportunity to learn, access to curriculum with high standards? I tend to think, what I would like to think as principal, that we do provide a rigorous college preparatory preparatory curriculum for students who want to go, these CPAs for, certainly kids who would be able to hold their own in college level work, either at the community college or at a state school. And then the honors courses are for kids who are more self-directed and independent learners, and show initiative and that kind of thing. And maybe a little bit more academically skilled in ninth grade, and then that skill continues to develop. We might want to also look at, do students leave those tracks? Do they have access to higher level curriculum? Do they stay in CP, college prep, or do they, in a track of sorts, or do they move on to honors courses? So I think your question is a great one and worth us bringing back and really digging into it. So I'm going to remember the question and we'll follow up on it. And I'd like to report back to you on what we find.
Right. So your answer was so good. You almost hit on all my future questions as well. But I'll ask them just so you have them. You don't have to.
Okay.
If you feel like
I'll go back to the tape.
Yeah, if you feel like you left something out and you want to add in,
Yep,
go ahead.
I know they're chomping at the bit to get up there.
Yes, all right. So one of my questions was kind of just for me. So if I look at this data and we say 66% of students were meeting or exceeding 10th grade ELA. So that means 34 were not. Does that mean 34% of the students would actually need to retake this exam in 11th grade to pass it?
No. So the partially meeting category has, that's what.
There's a score somewhere in the partial meeting category? Okay.
I'll tell you exactly though, just to.
Yep.
For the public too. If you
Please.
score between 470 and 499, right now, that's the current DESE designated range. You are in the partially meeting category, 470 to 499. If you score 486 and to 499, you can pass the MCAS. You don't need to retake it.
Okay.
All right.
So it's like really
Yes,
486.
but you have educational proficiency plan. 470 is really the cutoff. But if you score between 470 and 485, you need an educational proficiency plan.
Okay.
And so that's I gave you the broad range, but then there's a distinction within that range. And it's pretty generous, actually, if you look at it in terms of the amount of points you'd have to get on an MCAS test. And this came up in the whole debate about question 2, but I won't go there tonight. But there is a real threshold of passing, and students have multiple opportunities to retake it. But that question has to be decided on November 5th.
Gotcha. So you touched on the IEP thing, and one of the things that I was just thinking about was like, we'll look at 10th grade ELA, for example. So 23% of students on an IEP we're meeting or exceeding. That seems like a low number. And I'm wondering why that's the case. So I'm thinking, well, is it too difficult in Littleton to actually qualify for an IEP? Therefore, we don't have enough, there might be some students potentially with a learning disability that aren't included in that number, and therefore the number is artificially low. You don't have to answer that question, but it's something I'm thinking about. Or do we take a close look at the cohort and say, because again, the numbers are small.
Yeah.
Is the severity of the learning disability within this IEP what really is the challenge? So just some of the things I was thinking about, because it does seem like it's a low number, and we do hear from members of the community over the course of the year that perhaps those on an IEP that struggle with this aren't receiving X, Y, and Z. Although we have evidence that over the course of the year, they are, and that we provide as much services as we possibly can within the constraints of our budget. So I was curious about that. I was curious, you touched on this earlier, I was curious about sort of the report card grade versus the MCAS score, and potential fear that we have, inflated grades.
Yeah, just a question.
So just sort of curious, if someone's earning an A in a class and they've mastered the curriculum and had evidence of that, should they at least be meeting the expectations? Now, granted, that individual might not be a good standardized test taker or whatever, but I was just kind of curious as to what the trend is.
All great questions.
And then I loved your mid-watch collaborative that's going to take place, and this is a hot button for you, but I just want to let you know that if there are other opportunities for you to get involved in sort of MCAS related, hey, there's a subgroup forming, we need resources, we want, it might take some money.
Okay,
Although this is just a data point, it's an important one.
right.
So if you learn of anything and you need to come back to us, I need to go to this workshop or this study group's being put together, please let us know.
Thank you.
And in terms of your peer pressure to finish the exam, I get that. We're going to have to do something about culture, right? In terms of like, we're all in this together. The grade no longer matters for you to get your high school diploma, but it matters for everybody in town, because this is one of the metrics in which our high school is ranked. And we all live in this town for a number of reasons. The school system is one of them. So I don't know what you're going to do. I don't know if you can, you can even look at that SGP. Like, can we incentivize students who have a high SGP, and we want everyone to try their best, or we don't want anyone to quit on the exam early? But it's a challenge. I recognize that, but I think it's something that we can work through based upon the culture that we have within LPS.
Yeah, I'll just close by saying, it's so well said. I'll take those questions back. I want to follow up on each of those items with the staff as we continue to really do a deep dive into this data and try to figure out how we best prepare students for the next spring performance.
Thank you very much.
Justin, thank you for that. And you use the acronym SGP, and gives me an opportunity to maybe talk a little more. There's a lot of jargon in education. Student growth percentile is something we watch very closely. If we look at the slide that you were looking at with special education, at a 51.8 SGP, which is typical. What does that actually mean? I mean, you get these people that specialize in metrics, et cetera, and an SGP is comparing the academic achievement of students with similar learning profiles throughout the state. So when I see 51.8 in that group, it gives me a bit of confidence that there's some a bit significant confidence that these students are progressing in their learning from year to year. So it's a very important measure. And I know at times we throw these terms out and sometimes we need to slow down and talk about it. Well, that's one thing that we all look at really closely, and it's a focus. And I'm obviously involved in the data analysis with Mrs. Steele and the administration, and they are more correctly teasing down fairly significantly when they're doing this. And what we're doing as central office staff is we're creating a standardized approach That doesn't mean that's all you use, it depends on the situation that you're in. For example, John went back to the grade eights achievement levels of the MCAS exam. Sometimes you don't need to do that, depending on their achievement. So, and one thing that we didn't mention, because we do a lot, is that our assistant principals have worked very hard this year to take a look at chronic absenteeism and have come up with some significant strategies that are working well in our schools. We all know if students aren't in school, it puts them at a disadvantage in terms of learning what they need to learn here, especially in high school, where the pace of learning is significant for the youth. Just want to add those things.
I know everyone wants to get, so the SGP, I was thinking the student growth that was like similar to how the map work, where it's an individual score on your growth from year to year.
That's different.
It's different.
It's a different metric. So,
but it's not
you're right.
the individual score, or it is an individual score.
It's
Every student would receive their unique SGP.
yes, they do.
Okay, so that's what I was thinking, was just like,
Right.
you can look at someone's
But
And that's why you don't.
and
get
like you
percentages.
know,
yeah, but the
Yeah.
metric,
whatever, candy bars for everyone who gets higher than this.
Yeah. the metric
Whatever.
goes beyond Littleton Public Schools. It's throughout the state with like learners. So
Right. Well, you touched on the chronic absenteeism. I'm just curious because I know it's a state initiative, and I don't think everyone perhaps realizes it's a state initiative. Letters have gone home, emails have gone home. Like, does Littleton have a chronic absentee problem, or is it within a like micro population?
Correct, right.
correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it.
Good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Micropopulation.
Totally fair.
And our chronic absenteeism has improved also between 2 years ago and last year, and this year already we're seeing improvements.
Yeah.
So that is trending in a good direction,
Sure.
but it doesn't hurt to make that push.
Right.
Really hopefully.
Totally off topic, but since we're on it, like, so one of the things I saw was, coffee with the vice principal, I think, for absenteeism. And I'm just curious, like, I'm thinking, if the kid isn't going to school, the parent probably isn't coming in for coffee. Does that actually work, or? No,
This
so,
time, this time unfortunately.
okay, all right,
It did not have the desired effect.
yeah,
But I think the thing is that we're putting a different opportunity. out there,
sure,
Right?
and we'll see what works,
And
we'll
seeing
try
what
everything,
works,
yeah.
Exactly. And
Okay.
so it was kind of the hook that went out. Unfortunately, it was not a successful hook. And so going back to the table of, okay,
What do we do
Right.
differently?
and we know that middle school has done a really nice job in the past of going out into certain areas within the community, and that has been successful. And so this was like trying a neutral location using the library, for a variety of reasons, which is the other tricky part. I had a conversation with Andrew Romano about it and she was like, it could have been this, and I was like, you're right, it could have been any of those, and we can't figure out which one. So we need to acknowledge, right, we tried, it wasn't the right one, let's figure out what else we can do.
Sorry, we're going down this rabbit hole.
Blame me.
Just a question.
We always
When
do.
we, this to me sparks curiosity more than anything else. Do we have any data or like looked at data on what is causing? Like, I don't even know if there's a trend or there are very individual circumstances.
There are a lot of individual circumstances.
Yeah.
So my impression was that the trend was post-COVID, like people were out of school and then there was this like reluctancy, like, well, I don't have to really go, I did it remote, whatever.
Or I haven't seen my family in months and this is a priority for me right now. School can wait, which I heard a lot of for sure. And at this point, I'm just curious more than anything. Is it like a reluctance of school? Is it personal issues? And if it's personal issues, what sort of control do we have over that is a bad way of saying it? Other than, I know some districts in some other states that'll actually punish give consequences to kids that miss school. And in Massachusetts just doesn't do that, but there's just certain things that are outside of our control.
I mean, you've mentioned some of the things we see. And I go back to how do you help parents feel comfortable dealing with schools? And it really comes down to relationships. I agree. if they don't, if a parent doesn't have a good relationship with the school, they're not going to be jumping up and down to go for a coffee with the assistant principal. But when you take those opportunities to reach out to those parents in informal settings where you're not talking about something their child isn't doing, you have that opportunity to build a bond and a relationship, and then they start feeling more comfortable.
Yeah.
And then I guess in a basic way of saying it is it really emphasizes the point that we really care. And sometimes parents forget that at the time because they're not having positive interactions with the school. And we do care. I mean, every decision that is made for a child is in the best interest of the child. But sometimes parents may not see that because we don't always agree on what that is. So the more you can get out there and seek out those parents and make them feel comfortable, then you're going to have more people that feel comfortable sitting down with you if there are tougher conversations. Yeah. And we've been working on that as well.
Daniel, I relate your question to like my job at work. You know, you manage or supervise employees, and oftentimes there is a legitimate reason for absenteeism, but eventually that they resolve that situation, but then they continue to take advantage of the need for, you know, cutting out early or coming in late or missing work or whatever. And I'm sure that's like literally the same exact thing that's going on in the school system. Is there might have been a situation where they needed to be absent or felt that it was very important to be absent. Once that is extended, it's like there becomes an abuse of that, is my guess. And it's like, no, we need you to come back full time. Like what has happened has been resolved, or we can work through this, but we can't have you coming and going as you please just because you had that luxury at some point in time. That's my guess.
And my guess is from anecdotal data that there has been a shift in the demographics of the population in Littleton, where more and more people are coming from different countries. That requires longer periods of time, and plane prices have gone up. I hear this a lot. When I was a kid, we would go during vacations. Nobody can afford to go during vacation now. I'm being perfectly honest. And families live in different countries. As the demographics changes, families don't live here local or even in this country, but live in other places. And so that you can't just go for 3 days to another country. And so I'm sure that this is a trend. I hear it plenty. And I'm guessing that it happens a lot more in the younger ages than in the older ages when they know that they can't miss school because it impacts grades. And it's one of those things where, again, I feel like curiosity of like, this is a priority for families and some cultures, and that connection with grandparents, or, you know, they're missing some of that here. And so like, how can we approach this with a lot of questions and relationships, exactly like you're saying, and trying different things and throwing them at the wall is the best thing. I think it's a great idea.
You know, it's almost as though you've attended a few of our ACE meetings. You've had that conversation, exactly, right? Because we have noticed that there's a lot of just what you're saying, there's a lot of really significant case by case situations, but we have also noticed, and particularly this change of demographics, but also since the pandemic, I think there was a reprioritizing of individuals, right? If I haven't seen my family in so long, I'm gonna take advantage of being able to go do that. And you're right, we see it a lot more at the younger grade levels than we do at the upper grade levels. And we've had conversations of, right, so it's value. It's what the family's placing value on and what we want value placed on, right? And so coming to that table and figuring and having those conversations of where's that value lying? Who's the one to decide that that value can be placed there or cannot be placed there? And when does that stop, right? We've had a lot of conversations around our admin table about this. And because being present in school significantly makes a difference. But we also realize that there's real life experiential learning to be had in other opportunities as well. And so that we haven't solved that debate, I will put that out there, right? But it's certainly something that we're considering, which is why we're also kind of just throwing ideas out there to see what we can get to stick, but also to reinforce and build those relationships.
And it's a real interesting sort of equity challenge, I'll say, because you sort of hit it on the head of like differing values. And I wonder if there, like you said, like there is such a value in something that's being missed when children aren't at school, and there is sometimes for families an equal, if not more important value to a grandparent that is not going to be here much longer and having that relationship to where maybe they're not missing this completely. Like, how can that still happen if the child isn't in school? Maybe not in the same way, but at least in some way where it isn't an all or nothing situation. I don't know what that would even look like, but.
All right, I spearheaded and allowed us to take a deep dive on that tangent. Why don't we reel it back in and invite Vice Principal Vanjie up to discuss these overwhelming positive results at the middle school.
Jason can't be here tonight. He had some surgery yesterday, so he's recovering. So I will be.
Come on, get over.
All right, we'll start with grade 6 ELA. The SGP was 76.8, which was in the high category. 76% of students were in the meeting or exceeding category, and that was a 10% increase from the previous year. For students on IEPs, the SGP was 69.2, which again was in the high category. 32% of those students were in the meeting and exceeding, which was a 14% increase from the previous year. In 6th grade math, the SGP was a 59.6, which is in the typical range. 61% of students were in the meeting and exceeding category. That was a 1% increase from the previous year. Students on IEPs, the SGP was a 57.6, which was in the typical range. 23% were meeting and exceeding. That was a 9% increase from the previous year. 7th grade ELA, SGP was 72.2. That was in the high range. 69% of students were in the meeting or exceeding category. That was actually a 3% drop from the previous year. For students on IEPs, the SGP was 55.5, which was typical. 15% of those students were in the meeting or exceeding range. That was a 12% dip from the previous year. 7th grade math. The SGP was 58.4, which was in the typical range. 54% of those students were in the meeting or exceeding category, which was a 15% increase from the previous year. For students on IEPs, the SGP was 51.6, which was in the typical range. 15% of those students were in the meeting or exceeding category, and that was a 1% decrease from the previous year. Look at 8th grade ELA. The SGP was 52.9 in ELA, which is in the typical range. 65% of those students were in the meeting or exceeding category, which was a 3% dip from the previous year. For students on IEPs, the SGP was 49.3, which was in the typical range. 21% of those students were in the meeting or exceeding category. For some reason, Open Architects was not giving us the previous year comparison. So we looked into it. We couldn't really find a reasoning for it. So that was just sort of, we couldn't find what the comparison for the previous year was. Good enough. 8th grade math, the SGP was 63.9, which was in the high category. 55% of those students were in the meeting or exceeding range. That was a 1% drop from the previous year. For students on IEPs, their SGP was 52.3, which was in the typical range. 17% of those students were in the meeting or exceeding category, which was an 11% increase from the previous year. And then 8th grade science and technology. 72% of those students were in the meeting or exceeding category, which was a 6% increase from the previous year. And of students on IEPs, 28% of those were in the meeting or exceeding category. There is no SGP for this because they do not take it in 7th grade. Okay. So some impressions, strengths. 6th grade ELA student growth percentage was ranked #1 out of 323 Massachusetts school districts. Seventh grade math had a 15% increase in students moving into the meeting or exceeding category from the previous school year. Eighth grade science and technology had 72% of students in the meeting or exceeding category, which was a 6% increase from the previous year and 32% higher than the state average. Challenges. Unleveling seventh grade math has been positive, but leveling up requires further development of instructional practices to reach all learners. Assessing our new MTSS structure to ensure that it's consistent and effective. And scores for special education students improved, but there is considerable room for additional growth. And next steps. Provide additional training and support for our special educators, delivering in-class support and small group instruction in mathematics. Developing an instructional transition in ELA from sixth grade to seventh and eighth, assisted by an increased expectation of writing across all curricula. And through scheduling and prioritization, expand the breadth of our MTSS programs to reach more students with access to in-class interventions. Any questions?
I got a couple, but
Yeah, I have a couple. I think it was grade 6 math we were so worried about last year, like there was a real dip. And so I was really interested to see that increase with grade 7 math. That's that same cohort. And they had quite an increase, so that was nice to see. My question is, what can you say more about unleveling 7th grade math and what it means to level up?
Yeah, so when we decided to unlevel seventh grade math, there was a concern, like we had the pre-algebra and then the seventh grade math. So that we were gonna sort of meet in the middle to not, challenge certain students, but Jason has been from the beginning saying, we're gonna level up, we're gonna teach the pre-algebra to every student. We're gonna move it up, and that requires support to make sure that all students have what they need for this challenges of moving up the pre-algebra across the grade.
And is that a move to make sure that kids can get to calculus in high school? Because they've had.
I think that was a move. Jason he felt there was an equity issue, that he wanted all kids to have an opportunity to have an opportunity to move into algebra in 8th grade if they can meet the challenge.
Okay.
What has happened throughout time when it comes to level courses is it creeped into middle school. And it's a pretty young age to be determining the middle school's fate when they're teaching completely different courses to them. So the thought is, and certainly backed by research, is that we're not challenging some of our students because there's always so many opportunities to get into that higher class.
Mhm.
And there's no surprise to any administrator in this room that I'm not a fan of level courses in middle school, and I'm not a fan of level courses in grade 9 or 10 high school either. So I was excited to hear that Dr. Harrington is going to take a close look, and we have before, in terms of the curriculum offerings with CP as opposed to honors, etc. And I had the opportunity in the system I was in to work with the university and create honors programs within regular classrooms and for criteria to get an honors grade. And if you finished high school with an honors category, you were automatically admitted into the university with honors standing. And students can overachieve. And it's really not overachieving, but they can perform better than sometimes they think they can, and sometimes adults think they can. So it does disadvantage students. And now we go to the UK, they love leveling, still over there. And to the point where by the time a student is in upper middle school, the track is already determined for them. If you're going to be going to a trade or you're going to go to college. So.
Well, I applaud your efforts to make sure that everybody can get to algebra because it does have a trickle up effect with, if they don't get to calculus because they didn't get algebra in middle school, that can impact majors that they choose for college. It's a really important initiative, and I'm glad that you're working so hard to make it. It's an equity issue, so I'm glad you're working on that. Anybody else have?
I'm glad you asked that question, because I was actually thinking like just the opposite, like unleveling meant that we weren't going to give everyone the same, and what we were doing was so I'm glad you clarified that to me. My question is related to something completely positive. Why do you think the 6th grade ELA students received the #1 ranking in Massachusetts for student growth?
Angie Gresco, Diane Tricana. No, I think they.
I think you're right.
Yeah,
I think it was the breakout of
Yeah.
reading and writing was two
Yeah.
separate blocks.
Yeah,
They got double the time, double the curriculum, and that was done because it was a large group. And then it was like, it wasn't an accident, but it was like a scheduling need, and it was a double down on that instruction.
Yep.
And the current 6th graders aren't as big, and do they have that? They have that. We're sticking with that. Okay,
Yes, we are.
good.
yeah, and I will say this, when it came to that, they didn't just say, oh, this is a great thing, and we're just gonna let it unfold, like. Once that sort of came in, they hit the ground running. I mean, they dive through data. They look at it, all right, where are the areas that we need to improve, that we need to shore up, and then they use that to inform their teaching. And then they look at individual students and say, all right, what supports do these students need to move the needle? Like, they really use that data to inform it, and that's really trickled through to the upper grades and across into math and science. So it's really kind of started a wildfire in terms of really looking at the scores, not to teach the test, but to really use the data to drive, like, all right, what are our areas of improvement? Now, how do we use our resources to shore those up? And it's had a big impact, and I think the other subjects have seen it, and they're taking that role this year, and they're really jumping in.
What's also nice, if I can add in, I'm not gonna bring us down this a different path. But related to this, what's really nice is that adding that separate writing class, what that has done is really allowed writing across all content areas in grade 6. And so Andy Garko, who's teaching that writing class, has had conversations with Jen Goff, the math teacher, and Dustin, the social studies teacher, to say, like, what are the standards that are tricky or that you have a hard time getting to because of time? And she's able to bring those in to the writing class. And so it really is this beautiful kind of cross-curricular, it's double dosage of ELA, but without realizing it, they're also at times hitting that double dose of math, because what she's focused on is writing, but through a math lens.
Sure.
And so it is a really nice opportunity, not just an expansion of ELA, it's an expansion of ELA and. So I think that's just important to highlight.
It's incredible, and it was born from a schedule solution.
Right.
It's
Yes.
amazing.
I just want to piggyback on that with, since we're touting Angie Cresco, given that her background is in special education, working with students with language-based learning disabilities, but also having worked in special education across all content areas, it does give her an additional kind of insight and breadth to be able to have the skills and the capacity to do that writing across the curriculum piece that we definitely see evidence of that.
100%.
So my host personally lived that last year. So shout out, congratulations, please bring that back. It was amazing. I'm doing homework. I hate sharing personal stuff, but anyways,
Already started.
yeah, like we're doing homework, and I'm like, it's getting late, wrap it up. She's like, no, I have to have this. I have to have these, and it was a struggle, but she knew what she needed to have in the writing. And I think having that extra block all year long across that entire grade level, like, we probably got some really good writers out of it, or it doesn't seem as difficult for a vast majority of the population. It's not something that comes naturally to everybody. So I think that was awesome. Like, just like And I, like, number one out of 323 districts, like, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, I have to remember off the top of my head, but I think the SGP was,
That's, we
Fourth
couldn't
or
have gotten
seventh?
any better.
yeah, we were like top 11 in all the three categories. But
I just point that out because Desi doesn't like to rank districts against each other, so,
Open architects.
oh,
So when I went into open architecture, you can then go to the district and it will rank you against 11 schools in the area. And then it will rank you state out of 323. I like data, that's the thing.
secret.
We'd be, so now that we've touted the number one, we'd be kind of curious to see what the other ones are in open architect, like, for all grades and all. I mean, if we have the data, I'd be kind of curious to see it, where we rank.
Yeah.
But great job.
I have a general data question.
Sure.
Do we know, or do we look at data before 2019? Because of, there's a significant thing that happened in 2020, but 2019 just looks like a benchmark in all of these. Was that the trend leading up to 2019, or is that like just an exceptional year with an exceptional cohort? It's kind of hard to tell.
2019, I think it was, I'll be honest, I was in Framingham in 2019.
Just like
We
how
go back
this
5
chart
years.
is.
Yeah, we go back 5 years, is what we look at on the platform. So
Okay.
typically you want to look at least 3 to start to see that. 5 is a nicer number to look at. And so what's interesting on open architects too, we're going to start to hit a point where 2019 is going to go by the wayside, and we're going to start moving forward to see. So 2019 is kind of statewide. It's what even DESE will compare to when they come out with data and they're saying, we're getting pre-pandemic, they're explicitly looking at 2019. For us, it's just like with DESE, it's the last year before the
Yeah.
pandemic hit. It was in par with our other, with previous years.
It is, okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was wondering, like,
Yeah,
what
so
if
it's not-
previous years were like this and 2019 was just exceptional?
Yeah.
Okay.
Legacy
makes
of MCAS too, there's a next generation MCAS that came out with different standards and a different way of categorizing the scoring from needs improvement to partially meeting.
Oh, okay.
And that used to have failing instead of not meeting expectations as a category. So there's some changes there as well.
Okay, that makes sense.
Stacy or Janine, I don't want to leave you guys out.
Nope, you guys are having a great discussion, asking and answering a lot of great questions. Thank you.
Got your coffee on your home? Good.
I need
I
a
have no
coffee.
questions. I have no questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
You.
Thank you.
All right, Principal McDonald? Yes.
That you can tell you.
Yes.
Evening, everyone. We'll take a look at Russell Street's MCAS scores from last year. We'll start with third grade ELA. So our current fourth graders last year obviously was their first year sitting for the MCAS. So there's no student growth percentile for ELA or math for third grade. But 60% of our third graders last year were in the meeting or exceeding category, which was up 4 points from the previous year's third grade class. Our students with disabilities, 15% of those students were meeting or exceeding, which was a 10-point bump from the previous year's students with disabilities. When it comes to math, 58% of our students were meeting or exceeding, which is an 8-point bump from the previous year. And for our students with disabilities, 30% of those students in third grade were meeting or exceeding compared to 25, which is a 25% increase from the previous year. In fourth grade ELA, this is where we do get our first student growth percentile metric. We were in the typical range for our fourth graders, 55.1 in student growth percentile. 55% of our fourth graders were meeting or exceeding, which is a 6% dip from the previous year. Our students with disabilities were in the 44.6 percentile, which is in the typical range for SGP. The meeting or exceeding percentage was 5% there, which was down by 32% by the previous year. This is where it's really helpful to understand the cohort model, because that 32% is comparing that 5% to a whole different set of students on IEPs. So if we look at the cohort data, that cohort in third grade was also at 5% meeting or exceeding. So it was not a significant drop as that data may appear. It was actually, there was no change between our students with disabilities in meeting and exceeding from third to fourth grade. Not where we would like to be and room to grow for those kids there, but just wanted to clarify that because it can be a little confusing when you look at it. Similar story with fourth grade math, in a typical range for student growth percentile for the all students category, 59% of our students were meeting or exceeding, which is 4% below the previous year's fourth grade. Our students with disabilities were also in the typical range for student growth percentile. Their meeting or exceeding percent was 18%, again, which is lower than the previous year's fourth graders on IEPs. However, if you look at those students from third grade into fourth grade, they were at 5% meeting exceeding for math in third grade and grew to 18% meeting or exceeding in fourth grade. So if you look at that cohort, you're making progress. Again, a lot more room to grow, but making progress. Fifth grade ELA, typical student growth percentile for the all students category, 54% of our students meeting or exceeding, slight dip of 4% from the previous year. Our students with disabilities, again, in the typical range for their growth percentile, 14% of those students were meeting or exceeding, which is down 1% from the previous year's students. Fifth grade math, 58% in the student growth percentile in the typical range, 59% of students meeting or exceeding, a bit better than the previous year. Our students with IEPs in the typical range of student growth percentile, 26% meeting or exceeding, which is up 19% from the previous year's fifth graders. And looking at science, again, as Ms. Steele mentioned, they have 2 sessions of science. One session was the traditional, the other session was the pilot. So just for that one session of the traditional MCAS for science for our fifth graders, did very well. 62% of our fifth graders were meeting or exceeding. 36% of our students on IEPs were meeting or exceeding that science. Again, we don't have a student growth percentile because that's the first time they have sat for a science MCAS assessment. Move into just some general strengths and challenges from Russell Street for last year. So in the all students category, the average was in the typical growth range for our student growth percentile in all of our content areas. And 3 out of the 4 assessments. So if you look at 4th and 5th grade, because that's where we get student growth percentiles in math and ELA. So 4 out of those 5 assessments, we were above the 50th percentile, which means those students on average are growing more than the typical 4th or 5th grade student across the state. Another strength in 4th and 5th grade, we had the data to look at from the previous year, which students were in that partially meeting category. And there was a lot of effort last year through Title I and Tier 2 interventions to move those students from partially meeting into the meeting category. And there were 12 students that made that move in ELA and 14 students that made that move from partially meeting into meeting from the previous year to last year. And 5th grade math was a special strong point. We looked at the item analysis breakdown in the 5th grade data team meeting earlier last week. And we counted that there were 26 of the math standards where our students performed at least 10 percentage points higher than the state average. So there were really some math questions where our students were far and away exceeding state averages. I'll just point out one example. I always like to look at the multi-point questions in math because those are kind of the multi-step problems that our students have to answer. You answer part A and use your answer in part A to answer part B and then part C and then explain all of your work in part D. And when looking at those questions for 5th grade math especially, we were 15, 20 points higher than a lot of the state averages, which is really great to see because that's really promoting those critical thinking standards for our students. Some challenges to foresee for Russell Street. There is a large disparity, as you saw, between the meets and exceed percentages from our all students category to our students with disability subgroup. There's a big delta there, and we want to work towards making sure that those students with disabilities, and also in that second bullet point, that high needs subgroup, which is a combination of our students on IEPs, our low income students, and our multi-language learners. That those subgroups are making more than 1 year of growth per year because they typically have a larger gap to fill. So we want to make sure that we're shrinking that gap so there's less of a disparity between the percentages that you saw in the previous slides. And then another challenge this year in particular, we are in the thick of new curriculum for literacy, which comes with new standards alignment. And what we're understanding as we really dive into that curriculum is that there are going to be standards that are in that program that will be taught and assessed after our students take the MCAS. So we're working through that right now to really understand how that will affect how students do on certain questions that assess certain standards that they may not have had direct instruction on yet, because we have our pacing guide for Wit and Wisdom goes all the way to June, and we know that MCAS happens a couple months prior to that. So we're working through making sure that we know, we'll use this year to really understand how that's going to affect our students. The good news on that front, I know that Russell Street was in a similar situation a couple of years ago when they launched Into Math as the new math curriculum. And last year, a few grade levels adjusted some standards and when they taught those standards and those modules because they saw those dips from the previous year's MCAS. Geometry standards are coming to mind right now because I know that we made a huge jump in our geometry standards because the teachers were strategic in their planning and their pacing to make sure that they hit some of those standards prior to students sitting for the MCAS. We're not going to totally adjust our curriculum and our pacing to fulfill, when MCAS is, but it's good to know where we teach certain standards in school year so we can understand how that might be reflected in this one day. Our next steps, we've already are well on our way for that first one. So Reflex is a platform that helps students practice their math fluency facts and automaticity. We found that for all of our students, especially some of our struggling students on math, it's that automaticity that we really can lock that down. They have a much better, easier time getting to those higher order thinking questions and answering those questions correctly. So we've launched Reflex to all of our students this year. Last year it was piloted for our students in the Title I math program. And fortunately, a lot of those students that were partially meeting and now in the meeting were part of Title I math last year. So we saw a lot of success with Reflex. So that is now an expectation for all of our students. One thing that we encourage students to do is earn 3 green lights a week, which means that they're practicing those math facts frequently and making progress on those facts. I just looked it up. So far, in the first 3 months of school, Russell Street students have solved 1.36 million math facts. So there you go. Another next step that I've talked with our leadership team on is adjusting our win time to target skills and standards gaps that we're seeing across grade levels. So we're working with our team leaders to develop systems to strategically group students based on their level of need or their level of enrichment that they may need. To be creative in how we're using those 30 minutes per day where every student in the grade level at the same time has that what I need period, and how we can most effectively and efficiently use that time to target some of the skills gaps that we're seeing. And then our next step is the Wit and Wisdom curriculum includes writing throughout the module and responding to text in all lessons. Our kids are writing way more than they, well, I can't say than they were in the past because I wasn't here, but I know from working with in other schools that I've seen so much more writing in Wit and Wisdom than I have in other literacy programs. So I think that's going to benefit us in the long run. But we also want to make sure that we're identifying those MCAS type prompts that may not be in the curriculum, and supplement those to expose our students to that type of question, so that when they sit for the MCAS, they're not totally blindsided because the question is being asked slightly differently than it was when they were doing it in their, focusing question task or their end of module task. We just want to make sure that we're not catching anyone by surprise if they're asked to write about a theme when they're typically asked to write about what the main idea or the essential meaning of something is. We want to make sure we're catching anything that could potentially trip our students up so that we're getting accurate representation of truly what they know, and then that's just not being familiar with the test, especially for our youngsters who do not have experience with MCAS and what it may look like or feel like. A quick rundown on Russell Street. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions? We're getting tired.
I applaud your efforts to adjust the win time across grade level. That's a super tricky scheduling problem and also requires the teachers to really be in alignment with where they are in the curriculum. So it's a small needle to thread, but I think it can be really effective when it works.
Yeah.
So I applaud your efforts to try that, and I wish you well. And
Thank you. It all comes down to how we can use the data most effectively to put students in the right places so they can get exactly what they need. And then having that progress monitoring every 4 or 6 weeks to see their progress and if we need to make any shifts.
yeah, so that's, and then the other tricky thing this is the problem of content that is taught after the MCAS. That problem has existed ever since the MCAS has existed. And I don't know if there's any great solutions to it because, trying to get all of the standards covered before MCAS means that you're really at a rigorous pace that not every student may be able to meet. So it's, it's like, I think it's one of those problems that may never get solved, but, and then of course, what do you teach after the MCAS? Like, it's not like school's over. So, I think in a perfect world, if it was possible to do that and then do some project-based learning or something after MCAS, that would be great, but that's another giant challenge. So I applaud your efforts to really be taking a hard look at that, but
And
it's not going to be perfect.
We have other benchmark assessment data points that we use that are towards the end of the year. So we can we can really see the progression of our students' growth from a 9-month school year as opposed to when students sit for the MCAS in month 7.
Yeah, thank you.
I think I'm right, but in Russell Street, it's the maybe it's just certain grades. I'm trying to remember. It's like 2 different groups, and the kids stay, but the teachers rotate. Is that how some of the grade levels work?
In 5th grade, yes.
So it's 5th grade only.
Yep.
Okay.
A few of our 4th grade classes swap for social studies and science, but
Okay.
5th grade has the last hour and a half of their days 2-block rotation essentially.
So maybe this isn't applicable, but I was just curious, is there data to look at the 2 different cohorts within 5th grade? Like, can there be a peer analysis to say, hey, if this group of students did well on this aspect of the test and fell short here, and the reverse is true here, and can we learn from one another? I don't know if that's even possible, but
Yeah, where I think it would
learn that in
be
the school committee
most,
conference.
where we could really look at that would be in science.
Yeah.
Because this year, all 6 of our 5th grade teachers are teaching their homeroom for their
Okay.
full ELA block and their full math block.
Yeah.
Was how we could work it to make sure that wit and wisdom was taught. They needed 90 minutes
Sure.
for wit and wisdom. So students are only switching for science and social studies.
Okay. So I think Cheryl Temple promised us 70%.
Remember
I'm gonna have to go back, I'm gonna go back to the tape. You're only in year 1,
So fun.
and she left you with that massive problem, so. Am I right? I know
Yes, you are.
Yeah. It came to me like mid-presentation, so, we'll keep it on. But question not for you, but the question for everybody. If other school committee members are interested, I would like a deeper dive on the IEP population. We kind of see these numbers every year, and the numbers are, they're unsettling with me. To hear you say, 5% of the 4th graders, were meeting or exceeding in the ELA, and they were 5% last year too, so it's not that bad. I just, if the school committee would like it, and if there's no rush. But could we talk about the IEP population and the MCAS data? Because I think just telling the story about the makeup of the IEP population, of course, we don't need anything that's confidential, whatever. But just give us the narrative on what's taking place here so that we don't just simply look at the number and say, wow, those are really bad. And please, not tonight, please, but and not even next week, but sometime in the near future, please, if we could take a deeper dive on that so we have a better understanding. And we also don't really see state comparisons for IEP, and perhaps you could enlighten us with that as well.
Yeah, we're doing a program of evaluation. We're in the third year of our 3-year program evaluation, and this year looks at our inclusive practices.
Mhm.
And so that's certainly something that maybe we can incorporate into when we present on that.
Sure.
Perhaps.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful because it's such a small sample size. Sometimes the data isn't really accurate,
It's
so.
sensitive data, but I mean, it's the data does tell a story, and I think it's important to really, I think that it does behoove us to be looking at those instructional practices just because it is a little bit disparate across the buildings as well.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, and my baseline was like, because we talked about this earlier, it's roughly 18% of our population. So I just like a little bit of a deeper dive on these 18%. We celebrate 25, pick the number, 30% of students at the high school that are taking the APs. Let's get some more information here. Janine and Stacy, comments or questions for Principal McDonald?
I like your idea of having another pass at this with a focus on the IEP. Thank you for bringing that up.
Welcome. Good. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
We have another meeting.
Question.
All right, so question for the committee, it's 8:55. Elaine just sidebarred me and said, hey, we could move presentation 3 to the following week.
Plenty of room next week's.
Okay, so
On next week.
would the, what I'm
What
hearing,
did she say?
we're gonna, plenty of room next week in next week's
Oh my gosh,
agenda.
she said this.
No, some room in next week's agenda to take presentation 3 and kick it a week.
Nice.
Committee okay with that?
Brain power at night,
Yeah,
unless you could do it in form.
because I want everyone's full attention. I don't have a rest.
She wants to be presentation number 1 next week. I'm okay with that. You're the presenter. You're okay with that. Fine. We'll keep you in suspense for 1 more week.
Yeah.
Sorry to those that tuned in just for that. All right, that closes up the presentation portion of the evening. We'll pause for a second opportunity for interested citizens. The slow 3 count. Hearing none, we'll close that portion of the meeting and we'll move through our subcommittee reports. First up is PMBC, and unless there's a unique PMBC subcommittee report, I'll ask that maybe the Shaker Lane Building Committee update be given at the same time.
Yep, I can do that for you guys.
Thank you.
Kelly can probably chime in if you want to, but first I want to say you guys have such great energy tonight. I wish I was there. For such a long meeting, you guys are having so much fun.
Stacey. Just the room.
Please.
We skipped 2.
Seriously, I love it. Yes, I'll try to keep this brief because we actually have had a lot going on these past few weeks since our last school committee meeting. So October 29th, this Shaker Lane Building Committee actually presented at town meeting. We had about 10 minutes to give a lot of information to voters, just a general idea of what the project entailed. We went into the finances, into kind of what the tax impacts would be. We also went over the 3 different designs that the building committee and our architects have been working on. So I think it was a really great first go at giving the community an idea and kind of getting the word out about the project and what kind of the timeline is and what to expect going forward. So we have that. And I also wanted to mention that if for anyone who wants to know more information about the building committee's work, If you haven't been able to go to the tours or you missed the meeting, if you just go to the LPS main website, there's a link there for everyone to click on that it says Shaker Lane Building Project. And if you click on that, it can give you all of the up-to-date information as to what we've been working on with presentations. So the second thing that I wanted to update everyone on was we actually had one of our first not our first, but a public tour of Shaker Lane last night. It was about a 40-minute tour of the building for voters to come in just to get an idea of what the needs of the building are. So we had about 20 people that came for tours, but we are having and hosting another one on Tuesday, November 19th. At 6:30 p.m. So there's an invitation sheet on the website for the building committee. And if you would like to join us, we would love anyone to just sign up so that we have an idea of how many attendees we'll have. But it's a great opportunity to take a look through the school just to get an idea of what the needs are of the school. And we are also breaking out into small groups so that people could actually kind of ask questions as we're walking through the building so you can get a kind of a better idea of what the needs are and why we're involved in the project right now. And then lastly, we also had a building committee meeting yesterday in which we voted on kind of the final option for what we are going to move forward with the MSBA. So we have 3 different options for the building design. We chose, of course I had it on here, we chose option 3.1, which, to be a little bit more specific on that, so that's a new building in the upper fields, so that's behind Shaker Lane. So it's a completely new rebuild. So essentially what the kids would be doing is they would be in the Shaker Lane as is. The building would be built behind them while their kids are at school, and then hopefully with a good timing and transition, the whole school would move over into the new building, and then the current building would be demoed. So that's the option that we will be going forward with the MSBA. So the other 2 options that we've discussed and have done a lot of review on are no longer on the table, because now we're going to focus on really fine-tuning the design and the costs of this option that was voted for. And I think that's it. I don't know, Kelly, if I missed anything, but we've done a lot. So
Yes, you've done a great job. The only thing I can add is we created a banner on our website. We focused a lot on the internal structure of the school and how we've outgrown Shaker Lane. And we do have a 58-page educational plan that focuses on re-envisioning the education of children at Shaker Lane School. So you can find it on the website there, and I would encourage you to read it. It took us a long time to create that report, and it does really give whoever reads it an understanding of how we intend to move forward and continue with 21st century learning with our students. And the design of the school is integral into allowing us to do that. So please, if you have time to read it, late night reading or whatever, we'd certainly appreciate it. And as we continue on with our meetings, we're going to change our focus a bit and talk about more of the educational changes that we're thinking about as well. Because this was all staged in terms of a stage-by-stage process, and we really needed to first of all emphasize the fact that we've increased our program, we've increased our demographics of our student population. And we've outgrown Shaker Lane School, and our staff and administration have done a wonderful job of making it work, and they're still making it work. But we're getting to the point now where if we don't have the opportunity to do something different, we're going to be forced to do something different by adding portables, et cetera. And portable classrooms are typically added during a build. It's really not a good thing to add portables as a portable classroom as a way of taking care of your space needs. And in my experience, and it's only in my experience, somebody may have different experiences. Once you lay a portable classrooms on your ground, you may not look as enticing to your community that you really do need a new building. And all we're doing is band-aiding the issue that we have, because it's not just space. It's being able to educate our youngest learners in a fashion that's going to build those skill sets so that they're going to continue to be successful throughout their educational system.
Can I ask you a quick question? The Shaker Lane on the district website, you know how there's the separate link to the Shaker Lane project.
Mhm.
Is that going to be updated with the new information that
Yes.
that option has been chosen and?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, because I'm working on my entry for the town newsletter, so I will
Okay.
direct the townspeople's attention to that website with that new information.
Sure, and if you want, we can forward the latest presentation that we had last night to you so that you can take a look at it.
Yeah, can you do that? And maybe I can link that into the newsletter.
Yep.
Would that be
That'd be great.
appropriate?
Mhm, of course.
Perfect, thank you.
Stacy, it's Justin. The option that was selected, was that the Shaker Lane Building Committee's #1 choice as well? So I guess my question is the MSBA in agreement with the Shaker Lane Building Committee? Was that the selection that was made?
So I don't believe so it was up to our building committee to recommend to the MSBA. So I don't believe that the MSBA has a particular weigh in as to which one they want the most. It was up for us to propose to them, and they accept that as what we're going forward.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
And that was the one that's out back where all the community amenities were in the front half of the building, and in the back half it was all educational, and there's an opportunity for
Yep.
nature learning and all that good stuff. But that's good.
It's on the right
Yep.
hand side.
My other question, so 20 is good. 20 participants or 20 for the tour, I would have been like super excited if the number was like 50 or 100.
So we will too.
Was it 20 like unique first time consumers of the information, or were there a lot of familiar faces there, and 20 is kind of an artificial number and it was something less than that?
I would say half and half.
Half and half, okay. All right, because we will continue to do this as needed. The community needs to, they need to be aware of the current state of affairs with the building and the education delivery, so that when we go to town meeting a year from now, we feel like we have a well-informed gymnasium of citizens. So, I'm saying we'll continue to do it because I believe it's important, but it would be great if we could have a better turnout for next week as well. I did see like a little bit of Facebook chatter, which is good. Kind of no press is bad press with this type of thing. So hopefully we'll have a better turnout next week. I plan on making it just to have sort of eyes and ears on the tour. Heard it all, but plan on going.
A suggestion to maybe increase, because I always wonder sometimes if access is an issue, if we like enticed people with like a kid's movie as they like do something. I just always wonder if like childcare, how much that is a barrier for some.
We did offer childcare. Yeah, childcare was offered and no one took us up on it. Now this past week, it'll be available. We can make it available again if needed.
Thank you. My apologies, I already thought of that.
No,
Yeah, and there
You-
was,
You have to go on the tour if you take the child.
yeah. Yeah.
This isn't drop your kid off and go to
Thanks for the
Tavern Square.
clarification.
It's just for the audience, letting them know. Yeah.
and there were discussions about possible other opportunities that might become available, different days, or, some ideas bantered around about how to increase the availability for residents to come look at the school.
Correct. And with parent, I don't know if I touched on this when I stepped out, but parent teacher conferences are tomorrow. And for those that are coming into the building, there's a couple opportunities to get a little bit of a tour and a Q&A as well. So if you happen to have in-person conferences tomorrow and you want to inquire about it, you're already there, that'd be great.
We have some nice pamphlets to hand out as well.
Terrific.
School bill.
All set there, Stacy?
All good. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right, budget subcommittee, I'll report that the budget subcommittee had a meeting this week. So we've got a preliminary draft together, which will need to be tweaked and fine-tuned. But things are moving in the right direction. There was a little bit of a sneak peek on that tonight with a potential second resource officer. Some other requests or ads for the following year that we're working through. But we're also going to be likely presenting the budget presentation in a different format this year, which is exciting. So good work was done. I can report that, and we have our meeting scheduled for, our next meeting scheduled for sometime in early December. The meeting date escapes me, but Janine will make sure that you're made aware of that. In fact, I think I sent you an invite already, so you can put that on your calendar. That's all I've got for budget subcommittee, unless Kelly or Steve want to add anything.
No, I'm good.
No, we're working on capital. Don't have it compiled yet, but I'm working on it.
The interesting tidbit that I will add about the budget, that we spent a lot of time talking about, for everyone's benefit here, is that the out of district tuition spend is a number that can move quickly. And we've had a lot of success with that in the recent years of students coming back to Littleton, wanting to come back to Littleton, us being able to offer programs in-house. You know, perhaps they see.
Graduates,
What's that?
graduates and students moving out.
Yeah. Good. Thank you for that clarification or addition. You know, students or families might experiment with an out-of-district placement and then realize that it wasn't what they had hoped, and then they come back to Littleton. But we have, you know, we're always thinking ahead and forecasting, and there are a couple of situations where there's potentially an out-of-district spend coming up that would impact the budget. So, you know, we're going through it in that level of granular detail for everyone's benefit. The policy subcommittee has something for us this evening.
We do. This is the policy that we presented last time for first reading. We are now presenting for a vote. Do I call it second reading? Second reading, sorry. And if you remember last time, we had mentioned that it was missing the part about military and veteran status, which this version does have. That was a typo from the last one. But otherwise, no changes from what we heard in first reading.
I had an opportunity to read it twice now. I don't have any questions. Any
Same.
questions from our remote members?
Nope, sounds good.
Hearing none. Someone like to make a motion?
I would like to move that we adopt policy AC, non-discrimination and harassment.
Motion made.
I'll
by-
second the motion.
Seconded by Janine. This will be a roll call vote. Go right back to Janine.
Janine, yes.
Stacy,
Stacy, yes.
Eno,
Yes.
Elaine,
Lane, yes.
Justin votes yes as well. Motion carries. Anything else from the policy subcommittee this evening?
Know that we will meet in early December and perhaps have more policies for you.
Looking forward to it. We heard from the Shaker Lane Building Committee already. Is there a CPAC update for us this evening?
There is not.
Hearing none, that wraps up subcommittee reports. If there's no other business before the school committee, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
We adjourn.
Motion made by Elaine,
Second.
seconded by Vino. This will be a roll call vote as well. Janine,
Janine, yes.
Stacy,
Stacy, yes, and good night.
Yes.
Elaine,
Lane, yes.
Justin McCarthy votes yes as well. We have adjourned.